A huge thank you to patron Wombat V for suggesting today's video topic. If you want to suggest a topic for next Wednesday's Name Explain video, all you have to do is support Name Explain on Patreon for $1 a month. Find out more by visiting patreon.com/Name Explain, which will be linked down below. Anyway, the White House is quite possibly the most famous building in the world. Well, maybe just behind the Bass Pro Store Pyramid, but anyway. The global recognition that this building has is down to the fact that it is the private abode, as well as offices, of the President of the United States of America. It is seen by many as the heart of the US government, and has appeared in countless movies, TV shows, books, and even on the reverse side of the $20 bill. Chances are you are aware of what the White House is, and it's a pretty incredible building too. It contains no less than 132 rooms, 35 of those being bathrooms, as well as 412 doors, 147 windows, and 28 fireplaces. The kitchen alone can serve dinner for well over 100 people in one sitting. Former presidents have even added their own unique touches to the place, which makes all the sense in the world as it is their home. During James Buchanan's presidency, a greenhouse was built on the roof. Theodore Roosevelt added a tennis court, FDR added a swimming pool and movie theater, Truman had a bowling alley installed for his birthday, and Clinton was gifted a music room by his wife for his birthday too. Yeah, the White House is way more than just a building for signing paperwork in. While it is a truly fascinating building, its name isn't quite as interesting. The White House is named the White House because it's a white house. Yeah, you don't really need me to explain that one, I suppose. I guess we could dive deeper into why this house is white in the first place, but once again, there's not much deeper symbolism here either. The building was painted white in the middle of construction simply to protect the stone it was being built out of. Construction started on the White House all the way back in 1792, and by 1798 it was painted white. 2 years later, in 1800, construction was fully complete. Things get more interesting, however, when you find out that despite the White House has been a White House since 1798, it wasn't actually officially called the White House until just over a century ago. Prior to landing on this name, other titles were used for this building, both officially and unofficially. It all really began, as mentioned, in 1792. It was here in the still fairly new USA that it was decided that the country needed a new federal city. One dedicated to be the capital, with a focus on politics, and buildings dedicated to each part of their new governing system. Of course, one of the buildings that had to be constructed was none other than a home for the president himself. While George Washington was still president at the time and was heavily involved with not just the construction of the White House, but the city that would bear his name, he never actually lived in there and died before construction was complete. Finding a design for the White House itself, meanwhile, was actually achieved via a competition. Literally anyone was allowed to send in a design. There's rumours that Thomas Jefferson himself even entered in hopes that his design might be chosen, but of course that wasn't the case. The winning design was from a man named James Holborn. Despite laying the groundwork for what would become the most iconic building in the world, we actually know quite little about his early life. We know he was an Irish native from a lower class family, and would have even been barred from learning to read and write in his homeland, yet still somehow managed to become an architect in Ireland anyway. He arrived in Philadelphia in 1785, and eventually heard about this competition to find a design for the president's house. Amazingly, his design won out. This is undoubtedly an amazing story, and it's so definitively American. Someone moving from another part of the world to this new country, going from nothing to designing the literal White House. In his plans, however, it was obviously not called the White House. Instead, it had a different name, one that is probably just as bland and generic as that term of White House. It was simply called the President's House. This makes sense. The competition was to find a design for the president's house, so why would they have used any other term? Honestly, I quite like this name. It's not grand by any means, and it's very much to the point. It's also somewhat humble and personable. It gives me the same vibes that Animal Crossing has, where everyone has a little sign outside their house saying who they are. But then again, there are issues with this name too. It's not all that unique. At least to our ears and eyes anyway. While the term president existed way before Washington took the mantle, it hadn't been applied to leaders of a country at this point. John Adams even scoffed at the idea of using that title for their leader, saying that cricket clubs have presidents and nations do not. Ironically, he would go on to be the second guy to take on the mantle. This means that having a president's house would have been unique at the time, as the US was the first country to use that title for their leader. But since then, many countries have used the term for their supreme head of state, so it wouldn't sound all that unique to us today. Yet from completion on construction in 1800, this was the name the White House was officially known under. But right from the get-go at the start of the 19th century, many other nicknames started to emerge for the building. One of those being the Presidential Palace. This was apparently a title used more widely in Europe and with European politicians in the USA itself. The title makes a lot of sense. Palace, for a very long time, has been the go-to term for residencies of important people, and the president is a very important person to say the least. I can't imagine this name would have gone down all too well in the USA, however. The whole point of the country and the presidency was to not have a royal family of sorts, like was common in Europe at the time. And as palaces are so heavily linked with royalty, I imagine this term might have rubbed some Americans the wrong way. The name never received any official standing, but in 1818 another nickname which had become prominent did. From early on, the president's house was also being referred to as the executive manor. I find this name hilarious. It's as if you took that name of president's house and used the thesaurus function of Microsoft Word to find two fancy words, like the episode of Friends when Joey uses it on every word in that letter. Manor is a fancy word for home, and executive ties in neatly with the role of president. By 1818, the building was on its fifth president, James Monroe, and during his tenancy in the house, the official title was swapped from the president's house to executive manor. Yet by 1818, another nickname had emerged for the building too, one that would go on to have a huge amount of staying power. In the early 19th century, there were reports that the president's house/executive manor was already being called the White House. This shouldn't be all that surprising, really. We shouldn't be too shocked to find out a White House is being referred to as the White House. The popular story is that the name picked up traction in the aftermath of the building being set ablaze in 1814. This happened due to a larger siege/war between the US and the British, which kicked off in 1812. The White House was heavily destroyed during this fire, and it took around 3 years to bring it back to a good standing. This renovation saw the building be painted a fresh coat of white. And it's from here it's thought that the nickname of White House emerged. The thing is, we actually have evidence of it being called the White House prior to this renovation work, and even before it was set on fire. In an 1811 letter, from 1811, one Francis J. Jackson casually calls it the White House. The casualness in which he uses the term implies that the name was already being spoken fairly commonly. I'm not entirely sure who Francis J. Jackson is, but it's most likely this guy, a British diplomat and ambassador to the USA at the time. If this is the guy, then congrats. As far as I can tell, you get the reward for the earliest written evidence of the name White House. What this shows us is that the name White House is pretty much as old as the White House itself. And there's something I really love about this name. Unlike terms like the president's house or executive manor, the name has nothing to do with the function of the building. It instead relates to the design of the building itself. What this means is that designer James Hoban indirectly had a huge influence on what the building would end up being named. If he decided the building was going to be green or pink, it might have ended up being called the Greenhouse or even the Pink House. Hey, it might not even have related to colour at all. If he decided to give the building a huge clock tower, it might have ended up being known as the Clock House or something. I just find it fascinating that the name is so dependent on the design as opposed to what actually happens in there. This simple title picked up traction across the 19th century. While it was officially called the Executive Manor, more and more people were simply calling it the White House. The name couldn't be denied for much longer, and in 1901, then President/White House resident Theodore Roosevelt passed a law to make the White House the official name for the building. It was a long time coming, and finally the name had risen from simple nickname to official title, and it's great to see that choice was made by Teddy Roosevelt, one of the nation's most beloved and popular presidents. Well, popular enough to have his face carved in some stone with 3 others, I suppose. But it's from this moment that the name White House has been its official title. And despite how much the building has changed, even recently at the time of writing this video, I don't imagine the name will change anytime soon. I could be really lazy and make a joke about it becoming the Orange House or something, right? But you know what? I can't be bothered to do that. I'm not going to give that tosser any more attention than what he needs, so let's just move on. But of course, it has acquired other nicknames too, a really popular one today being the People's House, in relation to the idea that the person in there serves the people of the country. And of course, like many other head of state houses, it is commonly referred to as just its address, with that address being 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But suffice to say, it took quite some time for this huge White House to actually be named the White House. Name Explain depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explain videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/Name Explain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm Name Explain YT and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and once again, thank you all so much.